Yeah, I think we can get started, Tim. You've got 30 participants. I think you're in good shape.
Okay, go ahead. Let's go.
Okay, did Sheila has opened it up to the groups over here? Well, yeah, well, thank you all for joining us. This is our third webinar of the year, and this webinar is focused on leadership and leadership development. We've had our prior webinars this year were on surgical approach to refractory migraines, and Bauman Gairan and his colleagues gave a great overview of that. But then we followed up with needs in global health from the perspective of surgeons in low and middle income countries, and we included leaders in Peru, Kenya, Ghana, and India. And then this webinar is the third. It's on leadership development. We want the perspective of established leaders, and all of the people on this webinar are highly respected and well-established leaders. And our goal is to groom future leaders through upcoming courses in leadership development, which is a program that Joe Losi is developing. And we're going to launch that whole campaign at our annual meeting next month. Note that all of these webinars are recorded and they're archived in the association website. So you can just go to the AAPS website. You'll see webinars and archives, and all of the ones from this year and prior years are there. We've moved them this year from the members only area to the general area, so you don't need to be a member, because we really feel this content is so important. And we want, for example, this webinar not just to be for members, but for young people who wish to aspire to leadership. And that's what we're going to try to do today. So I'm going to let Tim King take over and he'll introduce his panelists.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Special Leadership Forum on Leadership in Plastic Surgery. How can we have lasting impact? What works and what doesn't? We are joined today by five extraordinary leaders in academic plastic surgery, each of whom has shaped our field in a meaningful way. Tonight's conversation is not just about titles or milestones, but about impact. What do we carry forward? What lessons must we unlearn? And how do we prepare the next generation to lead even better? Our panelists tonight are Dr. Scott Hollenbeck, Dr. Andrea Pusick, Dr. Joe Losi, Dr. Justin Sachs, and Dr. Gail Gordillo. So let's begin. I'll hand it over to Sam, who's going to start.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. Dr. Hollenbeck, as ASPS President and Chair at UVA, your leadership spans both institutional and organizational realms. Can you tell us what have you learned works and what doesn't work when trying to unify a diverse community of surgeons under a shared vision for strategy for long-term specialty growth?
Yeah, well, thanks, Sam and Tim and Arun and the rest of the panel. I feel very humbled to even be part of this panel. A lot of people I respect here who have actually mentored me and served as examples of great leadership. So start by saying that. You point out, an interesting thing, and that is oftentimes we have multiple entities or organizations that we're leading or trying to lead at the same time. And that can be challenging, especially if they have divergent goals and missions. But I think there are some things that are common to leadership in societies and also even in your institution that I'd like to share. And I would start by saying most effective leadership, I think, comes from understanding of the organization, understanding of the institution. And that's very hard to do when you're brand new to an organization or institution. Very hard to come in and immediately begin leading when you don't really know too much about really the dynamics of what's going on. So I would encourage anyone who is in that kind of position or is thinking about that to learn as much as you can about the group that you're working with. And I'll give an example with the work I've done with ASPS. Started out as committee work, and we've all done this, and showing up to the committee meetings and participating, and then possibly rising to the chair of that committee, and again, leading effective group meetings in that regard, learning more and more about it, volunteering for other committees, learning more about other areas within the organization or society, and then getting to a point where you become somewhat of a subject matter expert, if you will, where your opinion is not simply just a random opinion, but is actually an informed opinion, and is hopefully impactful and can hopefully serve as a way to move the organization forward. I think the same thing is true at your institution as well. You have to learn as much as you possibly can. And there's no easy way to do it, I don't think. It just takes a lot of time and effort. You have to build relationships as well. I think that's especially true in the institution, where you're working very closely with people and there's limited resources, and you have to advocate for your group, and you have to have those relationships, and that takes time to build. So I think that's the first step. Once you get into that position where you've learned enough to be somebody that can add an important opinion or insight, then you have to work with your team and develop your team around you. You can't do this by yourself. You have to recruit good people and people that want to participate in moving something forward, who have that sort of entrepreneurial or innovative spirit, who want to partner and do something challenging and try to make an impact that's bigger than themselves. So building your team, empowering your team, and promoting your team, such that when they have an achievement, you recognize them, and hopefully that brings some value and fulfillment to their work, which further amplifies your effectiveness. And then I think finally, to deliver a strategic mission that people can have buy-in to, that's very hard to do. Obviously, you have to have the understanding, which we talked about first. You have to have the team around you, which we talked about, and constantly be taking care of that team. But you need to be able to articulate that mission. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And that comes down to communication. Communication is extremely important. Also takes time, also takes energy. You have to go out of your way at times to make sure you're communicating with the people around you so that they understand the decisions and why you're making those decisions. And then finally, I think you do have to lead from the front to some degree, especially true when you come to a new place. You may have done 1,000 free flaps or whatever at your prior institution, but when you get to a new place, you have to sort of establish yourself as somebody that can do that. Or if you're a big researcher somewhere and you come in, you probably would want to continue to demonstrate that you can do the research as well. I think that really helps with buy-in, with people seeing you as an example, and not just somebody that says things, but somebody that actually does things. And you got to lean, at least in my opinion, I think you need to lean into the things that you're good at and the skills that you're good at. Be aware of your own deficiencies, be aware of areas where you can grow, but also leverage the things that you know a lot about to really push things from being good to hopefully being really good, because you're likely to succeed in those areas because you have skill sets that fit that. And in areas where you're deficient, that's where you need good people to help you and good people on your team.
Thanks so much. Some great perspectives. Does anyone else have a similar thought or other anecdotes from being in a place and then traveling to start anew somewhere else in kind of that initial few years of time period?
So, Sam, if you don't mind, I'll just chime in.
Yeah.
When I moved to IU, I had a coach, which is one thing I would say. Coach is super valuable. If any of you have ever had the experience of being coached, it's a good thing. And what I was coached to do was introduce myself to people, particularly start with the faculty. So here's me, here's what you can expect of me, here's what I expect of you, and what's my vision, and what does it look like when we achieve that vision. And I went to a place like IU and told them I thought we could be the best plastic surgery program in the country, and I'm sure they probably thought I was crazy. But I think that was a really good way to start, was to say, here's me, here's what you can expect of me, here's what I expect of you. And it was a good foundation. And then the second thing, I think, is be your authentic self. Don't try to be something that you're not. If you're not ready to be, don't think you have to come in and be the boss and know everything from the get-go. I wanted to take time to learn and observe. It wasn't up to me to get out there and just, plant my flag and say, I'm the boss now. I really wanted to learn. So, and And I think people appreciate that when you're out your authentic self, and I think it will be less stressful for you as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Dr. Goodell. Dr. Sachs.
When I took the job at WashU 5 years ago, Dean Perlmutter at WashU School of Medicine gave me the advice, don't do anything for 6 months. He said, speak to everybody, meet everybody, shake hands, go to dinners, go to breakfast, and don't do anything significant. However, I started February 1st and COVID started March, in the middle of March, and that turned the world upside down. So we had to do a lot of different things, but that advice is very important. Is don't try to change things right away. There's a culture at whatever institution you're at, and it's really important that you understand whatever that culture is before you go ahead and do anything that changes that culture. Become part of it. And also, Gail, I used to have a tennis coach in high school. I miss my coach. I really do. So I think any kind of coach is important to have. I agree with that.
Awesome. Dr. Pusick.
I just want to emphasize something that Scott said, and also Gail, but Scott, about the concept of and then this is more about recruiting people as you're coming in and looking for folks that want to have an impact that's greater than themselves. That's what Scott, those were your lines. And that's something that I really look for. And you have to model that as well. But I think to me, that's a key thing. If people want to come in and they want to have an impact on the future of plastic surgery. I think you made a comment, Scott, about the importance of communication. I've had to learn maybe the hard way a little bit that for me, the right level of communication is what feels almost like over communicating. Because in the absence of information, people will, they come up with conclusions that might not be true. And then Gail's comment about be your authentic self, again, is something that I think has taken a while to learn, but it really resonates with me because I think that's, for myself, that's when I'm most effective as a leader, when I actually am myself, not someone else's vision of what an effective leader looks like.
Wonderful perspectives. Thank you all. We're now going to turn to the evolving definition of value in plastic surgery and how that shapes leadership.
Dr. Pusick, your leadership has reframed how we think about outcomes and patient experience in reconstructive surgery. How do you view leadership in a data-driven era, especially in ensuring that metrics enhance rather than constrain the humanistic aspects of care?
Thanks, Carrie. So I think I could not agree more that it's so important that our metrics be aligned with humanism. And I think many of us feel that there has been a fork in the road where we're being held to metrics and yet we're trying to do our very best for our patients, and there is misalignment. I think when there is, so full stop, our metrics need to be aligned with what we feel is our goal as physicians, as surgeons, and those are the metrics that we'll care about and that we will continue to try to rise to. I think it also, so for me, patient-reported outcomes are the thing that I've advocated for throughout my entire career. And I think they are one of those metrics that I think actually does align with our humanism and how we care for patients. Patients come to us with problems. They come with functional issues. They come with facial deformity after trauma or cancer. They come with diminished quality of life. We seek to address those. We seek to help. So our metrics need to measure our success at those things. And so I think that's the opportunity for the alignment. I would just also add, I think that the metrics of just do no harm, vitally important, remain important, but they're just no longer sufficient. People don't have operations to avoid a complication. They have operations with other goals. And for us to continue to improve and as we move up in our performance, we need metrics that go in that direction. And first do no harm, while vitally important, just doesn't really cut it anymore in terms of where we are in healthcare.
What advice would you give to future leaders trying to integrate patient-centered outcomes into institutional strategies?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say, first of all, I think so, and I'm speaking more again about patient-reported outcomes and metrics overall that resonate with clinicians. I think that one is to convey that it is simply the right thing to do, full stop. But I think also, and this is something actually this came out of a study we did interviewing CEOs of hospitals. And they really did feel both it was the right thing to do, but it also positioned the institution well vis-a-vis future patients. So right thing to do, and also it resonates with patients. And then I would say, I guess, just very practically speaking, again, this relates maybe more to patient-reported outcomes, but payment models are being, performance, so PRO-PMs, performance measures, but also payment. CMS payment is increasingly going to be being tied to patient-reported outcome measurement, which basically is to say we are going to be held accountable to say if we operate on a patient to improve quality of life, physical function, that payment models will be aligned. And the example is orthopedic surgery is sort of the big national example right now, where all major joints and that are being paid for by CMS, that collection of patient-reported outcome, functional status, effectively both before and after joint replacement, is now mandatory for payment. And then I would also say, if you're going to just try to get buy-in, is that hospital rankings are increasingly going that way. And that's where Newsweek rankings are going as well. So just some pragmatic things as well.
Thank you, Dr. Piesik. I'll ask any of the other panelists, do any of you all have experiences in using outcomes in your leadership style, strategies in your institutions?
Well, yeah, I'm happy to jump in. Mine's, I guess, more of a question really for Andrea. And, have you had examples or times where you've been able to use patient-reported outcomes to advocate for resources? A lot of times we will use things like productivity or clinic visits or things along those kind of nature. But what about patient-reported outcomes as a way to help get things that you need to succeed?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Well, the example that comes to mind for me is some of you may remember the MROC study, the Mastectomy Reconstruction Outcome Consortium. And so one of the key goals of that was to comparative effectiveness across breast reconstruction approaches. And just to cut to the chase on it, what we found, one of the key findings of MROC is that autologous reconstruction was associated with better long-term outcomes as perceived by patients. Not to say that, not that everybody needs to have a flap or should have a flap, but that from a patient perspective, that was very clear as one of the key findings. So at that time I was at MSK, and at that point at MSK, we were doing a lot more implant reconstruction actually than autologous reconstruction. So we took that, Bob McMahon and I took those findings to the hospital leadership and basically made the case that if we were going to be at one of the top breast cancer reconstruction shop, we needed access to the operating room. We needed resources to be able to expand microsurgical capacity, and they heard us, and those resources flowed. So it was really an opportunity to use the data to advocate for patients and advocate for our group to be able to do the operation that our data was telling us was something that we need to be able to offer to our patients.
Any other comments? Thank you. So thank you, Dr. Piesik. As we reflect on mentorship and legacy, let's explore what it takes to shape future leaders in our field. Dr. Losey, your commitment to education and training is evident in the many surgeons you've mentored into leadership roles. You've also been active as Vice Dean for Faculty Affairs. What have you found to be the most effective and least effective strategies for cultivating leadership skills in residents and junior faculty?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think initially, ideally, I hope to have modeled, and we all on this call have modeled a passion for leadership and the reward that it brings. And with that's one thing. Another is to try to identify and to nurture those trainees and junior faculty who are beginning to demonstrate leadership competencies, and then use your influence and your connections to open doors and steer them in the right directions and mentor them to that end. And then I think the third thing is formal training. I became a division chief 20 some years ago, 20 3 years ago without any formal training, just like most people do. It's sort of like you're the last person around or the most qualified. You have the largest number of grants. So you're a successful researcher. Here, you be the division chief without any formal training. And you know, many people survive that way, and there are a lot of casualties of that process. So I am a firm believer in once you model the reward and the sacrifice that leadership brings and costs, identify those who want to be like that, and then train them. We started here at Pitt a program, a year-long leadership course called the Senior Residents and Fellows Leadership Academy, where each department identifies 1 or 2 people who have already differentiated, you know, becoming a leader, shown interest and competency, and then we take them and we put them through a year-long leadership course. As Arun had mentioned early, we're going to roll out and share with everybody a new member benefit training course for young new members of the association called the Academic Medicine Leadership Academy. Again, a year-long intense training with association leaders, coupled with university professors to train the future academic leaders. And then those that are really committed to it, they need to take time out and get formal education. I mean, I think I'm counting how many MBAs are on the call here. It is a real leadership course. I took it way too late and should have done it before. I'll close the 30 seconds. I just listened to a leadership talk by the author of The Leadership Challenge. It's a great book if you haven't. I just listened to this. He said the secret to training, what is the secret to training leaders? He said it's the same as the secret to success in life, and that's to stay in love. We all know what love, that first love feel. It is a powerful emotion that it takes away the need for sleep and food and everything else. And that will ignite the fire in other people in leadership training. And leadership is it's an affair of the heart, not the head. So we really need to be committed and love those who we're leading. So thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Losey. As you mentioned, your academy, your leadership academy, and we're looking forward to what you're going to bring to the association. But I wanted to ask, what qualities do you look for in future leaders when you talk about, you know, picking out future leaders for your program at Pitt?
Yeah. I give a talk on the R's of leadership to the course. One is regulation and responsibility, resilience, and relationships. And those 4 things I think are the most important qualities of a leader. Regulating yourself, the emotions, your own self, emotional intelligence, resilience, responsibility, and then developing relationships. They're the 4 qualities I think are most important in a leader.
Thank you. Any other comments from our panelists about how to determine future leaders and what you've done to build others and promote them in leadership?
I think the key here is that you have to be selfless and you have to promote people around you. Those that are below you, those that are above you, and those that are next to you. And you have to go out of your way to take time to meet with them and to actually pick up a phone or send a note or an email or connect people at national meetings, local meetings, and actually help put people in positions where they can give back, putting them on a committee, getting them a grand rounds presentation. And it's like, you know, it's politics. You have to promote the people that are working with you, and you have to do it outside of yourself with no expectation of anything in return. There's no quid pro quo. You have to be almost like a catalyst. Like nothing should change about you. You should just promote these people and show them a path forward and help them model good behavior. But you really got to put them on stuff. You have to actually transact a little bit.
Thank you. Dr. Godilla?
I like to say that my favorite part of my job as a leader is to highlight the great things that the people that I work with are doing. My favorite part of the job, for sure. And especially with your young faculty. You know, like I had my burn unit director said, oh, we had 10 abstracts. We won this award. I turned around and sent it to the chair, to the CMO of his hospital, to the rest of the faculty in the division. You know, that deserves a shout out. And he would think to only send it to me, but I'm super happy to send it out to everybody else. And it's not just a feel good, but when I'm going to the CMO and asking for resources for that burn unit, they know these people are producing. So, you know, you have to make people feel valued. I think all of us will certainly, you know, I left because I didn't feel valued when I was at Ohio State. And so, you know, you have to make people feel valued and you have to acknowledge your wins. It's hard. You know, what we do is hard, but you got to acknowledge, you know, when people do a good job, and shouting it out to others is a great way to reward them. And like I said, to have that in your back pocket when you need to go and ask for resources.
Thank you. Dr. Gossain?
Yeah, just a comment about the identifying future leaders. I think we all of the people on this call are leaders, and the people we're working with will recognize that, and they will seek out, you know, they'll ask the very questions you're asking. How can we be involved in this? How did you start your career? How did you build a career? I think you can very quickly identify these are people who are going to be future leaders, as opposed to someone who just says, how did you put that suture in? So they're looking for more than just the technical knowledge that you might impart, and those are the people we really have to mentor and support. So I just want to make that comment.
Thank you. Dr. Hollenbeck?
Yeah, I like that point, Arun. That was well said. But I do also think at times, you know, you need to give everybody an opportunity to lead. And I think not necessarily have in your mind, you know, exactly what you're looking for. Obviously, you need to have some thoughts about that. But often I've been surprised at maybe what I thought would be a good leader maybe doesn't succeed. And I don't know that until I've given them the opportunity to try, or maybe somebody I didn't think would be a good leader, if I put them in the right environment, maybe that they actually lead in that. For example, somebody that might be your director of your clinic or of your burn center or something, you know, it might actually be very good at that, but may not be as good at leading the faculty group or compensation committee. So there's different opportunities to give people chances to succeed. And I think that's one of your jobs as a leader, is to try to find the opportunities in which they are likely to succeed based on their skill set. So I very much favor giving a lot of people opportunities. I listen for feedback from other people. You often get that, you know, hey, so-and-so is really amazing. I enjoyed working with them. That to me is sort of a checkbox that this person is demonstrating, not just to me, but to other people, that they have the potential to be impactful.
Great, thank you. Dr. Pusick?
Thanks. I just want to emphasize something that Gail said, and also what Scott just said, but that the comment about people need to feel valued and how important it is for people to feel valued. And you have to be intentional about telling people how much you value them. I think also because our healthcare system sometimes make people feel devalued, right? And yet, like as their leader, you're that core person, and your words of praise mean a lot. So I think that's one thing I've learned also, is just be very explicit with it, and like, but meaningful. I don't, don't say something you don't mean, but I think but meaningful praise that's well pointed, I think is really important. And then also Scott's comment about finding the right thing that resonates with people, and then they lead in that direction. Like somebody who's really good on the financial thing is going to lead in that direction and be great at it. Somebody who does not care about the money, but really cares about quality, cares about something else. I think you have to find the thing that resonates for people, and then they go. And so some it's trial and error, right? Like I thought you were going to be a this, but actually I see your eyes light up when we talk about that. So we need to go back and reconsider but I think it's finding the right fit for different people.
Thank you. Dr. Gordillo?
So I think, Arun pointed it out, and there is some element of people taking an initiative and showing their desire to be a leader. But I also think formal training is really important, very helpful. One of the things that I really enjoyed, so my chair at my previous institution, he had a book club for all the division chiefs. And we read leadership books. And actually, before I started, he gave me a book called The First 90 Days. And I read that before I started and met with him to discuss it, about where did I think the program was at, and what was going to be my approach. And they talked about you have to flex your style depending on where you're at. And, in some things we were at a certain place, and in other things we're at a different place. But I think everybody enjoyed that. I think it was a good sort of little team building exercise as well. All the division chiefs had an assigned chapter that they had to discuss. So it was good. It's just a way to get some degree of leadership training. Now, it was good, but not the same as formal training, I would say that. I did the ELAM program that is specifically designed. They'll tell you point blank, they're designed to train chairs and deans. That is their goal, and you learn at a very high level. It was invaluable for me, a great investment. So,
Dr. Gadil,
Great.
can you explain a little bit more to the audience what the ELAN program is? You briefly said what the goal is, but for the people who aren't familiar with that, can you just explain that to the group, please?
So it's called Executive Leadership in Academic Medicine. And actually they have, I'm just going to their 30th anniversary alumni meeting, and we get to hear from the woman that won the Nobel Prize for mRNA vaccines, and Anthony Fauci, in a group of about 300. So that's pretty awesome. What they do is, and there's a couple tracks now. There's one for if you want to go through the traditional academic medicine like chairs and deans. Now they have one for sort of health executives. So they have a new track for that. And there's one called Elate, which is for engineers. And you come in, you have a peer group. They put you in learning communities. You have an individual project that you have to do. You have a group project that you do with your learning community. One of the coolest things was, and you get sponsored by your institution. So that's the other thing. So the School of Medicine sponsored me. The first time that we met as a group, you meet 3 times as a group. We had to do this exercise called Save the Failing Medical School. And they do it in a way so that you have a very short amount of time that you have to solve the problem. And you have to work in a group. So you have to trust each other and get people to do certain things and come up with your solution of how you're going to save the failing medical school. And then you have to present it the next morning to several deans and CEOs of health systems. And it's hard. I mean, that's sort of your initiation. But it's brilliant. And you start off before you even go, you take a Myers-Briggs. And they are behind the scenes pulling the strings on how you're grouped with different personality types. And they tell you afterwards, we're going to give you this exercise and see what you do. And then say, well, was this hard because of this or that or the other? But it was, the other big thing they did was they wanted you to interview. You had carte blanche to interview anyone in your institution, carte blanche. I interviewed the provost. I interviewed the CFO. You're trying to learn how your institution works and what valuable insights you could gain from those people. And it was super, super helpful. So a brief overview.
Well, thank you. So I want to thank all of you for chiming in on leadership advice skills. And so now we're going to turn.
Dr. Woodbury, I think Dr. Gosain had a comment. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, great. Yes, Dr. Gosain.
Sorry, just a quick clarification to Gail. Correct me if I'm wrong, but ELAM is only for women, or am I wrong in that?
No, it's just for women.
Yeah, so I just make that point because I don't think you clarified that.
Sorry.
All right, thank you. So now we have talked about the theme of developing people, and let's now head into the question of building and sustaining teams. I'll turn it over to Dr. Lynn.
Thanks, Dr. Sachs. Your department at Washington University has excelled across clinical research and innovation domains. Can you tell us what are the structural or cultural elements you've found critical to building a division that sustains excellence in a large department of surgery, and what are the advantages and disadvantages to being a division within a big department of surgery?
Dr. Lynn, thanks for the question. So I've been here 5 years now. We are a division in a department of surgery in a 3-state healthcare system, 25 hospitals, and we cover about 11 hospitals. So the plastic surgery service line is branching out across the system. We're in the process now of hiring about 5 new faculty. And what we've done in the division, when I arrived, I think there were about 9 or 10 faculty, and we've doubled everything. And what I've done to kind of exist and be successful within the department is have a structure. So, you mentioned, what I've set up is clinical education, research, and innovation structures. So we try to optimize all 4 of those kind of metrics. So every day I'm thinking, how do we optimize clinical work, educational work, research, innovation? And then within those, we have 10 service lines, from aesthetic surgery to breast, to nerve, craniofacial reconstruction, transgender, wound, extremity. So everybody has a title. So there's a director of each service line, and each person is kind of held accountable to those 4 different things: clinical education, research, innovation. And we are very transparent with productivity. Everybody knows on a daily basis their charges, their collections, their RVUs, their accounts receivable. We're very transparent with how we pay people. And we're very transparent as a group that we're all in it together. So not everybody is doing 16,000 RVUs. Not everybody is collecting millions of dollars, but as a group, we help each other, and we have a culture that we know we are working to help each other to support everybody's niche within plastic surgery. I just finished the faculty meeting about 41 minutes ago, where we were going through all the things I just mentioned. And that was the structure that I set up when I got here, pretty much right away. Not making changes, but just overlying a framework of how people should behave, both clinically and academically, and then within the group. So I think the way that we've been successful within the Department of Surgery is that we've been very transparent about how the structure is set up, about how we are optimizing all 4 of those parameters, which I mentioned, and also really adhering to the clinical and research mission that we are an academic medical center. So we teach and we do research. And that's the only thing that differentiates us from a private practice. And I'm not saying that in private practice you don't do teaching and you don't do research, but an academic medical center, fundamentally, if you distill it down to its base nature, it is a teaching institution and it's a research institution. And we take care of patients. And so what I've tried to be very transparent with the department leaders is that's what we do. And we always lead with clinical work, because that's what pays the bills. And so, I have a say, because I got an MBA and I did that over 4.5 years, it became part of my DNA of how I act. No margin, no mission. If you can't make a profit, a single dollar, you can't support the mission of all the things that you do. So I've just been very transparent with everybody. I'm very transparent with new faculty hires. I'm very transparent with people that have been in the system for a long time. And that's taken some cultural shifts here. Me saying no margin, no mission, me being very, focused on profit, I get hit for that in an academic center. WashU is #2 funded in NIH dollars, so it's a very serious research institution. But as a leader and in creating that structural culture, if we're not honest, I can't be successful, because when I asked the chair of surgery that we give 7% of our top line revenue to every year, I want dollars to support research and development to help us fund our research. I can't get back our taxes unless I prove that we're adhering to all the things that I just mentioned, which is, clinical productivity and educational productivity and research productivity. So I think just, and then, then to your question about division department, at WashU, I would say at this point in 2025, it's semantics. Everybody has a boss. You have to pay taxes. At Hopkins, we paid all the taxes to the dean. Here, we pay half the taxes to the chair office and half the taxes to the dean's office. So it's really semantics if you actually see all the dollars. There's some division chiefs and department chairs here that I know do not see all the dollars, not everything. We see every single revenue and expense here. So I do think the pros are we're in a big department, over 220 faculty. We're about 18 or 19% of total revenue of $100 and something million. We collect about 20% of that. So we're a big part of it. The pros are there's a lot of infrastructure to support research, management, educational leadership. The negatives are I have to clear my decisions with a general surgeon that ain't a plastic surgeon. Doesn't see my vision the same way I do. And they have to balance sometimes the other 80% of the department, the other divisions, urology, and surgical oncology, and transplant, AC, and trauma. So every day, week, month, I'm constantly fighting for our specialty and fighting for the division for resources. And so, I don't know, if we were a department, I'd probably be fighting the dean every day. So the thing is, the key is to, I would say, to have a structure and be consistent every day with it and repeat it to yourself and repeat to others so people get it. And that's where I think we've been successful. And, we're growing here, and it's not without knocks and, and some failures, but overall, I think if you every day keep growing and work as a team and are transparent in how you compensate people and transparent in how you reward people, I think you can over time, be better than, not have a losing record, but have a winning record over time.
Wonderful. Congratulations. I want to open this up to the group really for a moment. This is really an age-old question, and I'm sure someone else has a perspective on this. As we've seen divisions becoming departments, becoming back divisions. I'd like to hear from others on this. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I agree usually with everything Justin says, but I have to disagree on this one to some degree. And he qualified his answer there at the end and gave us what seemed to be perhaps some real insight there into some of the challenges of being a division versus department. And I get it. I mean, having worked in a division for a long time and now being in a department, it's just a total different world. And the reason why is because what he was saying there at the end, it's the autonomy. It's the ability to choose your destiny, which is extremely important. And yes, you do have a boss, you have a dean, whereas before maybe you have a Department of Surgery chair. But that's totally different, in my opinion, because the dean is kind of overseeing the entire system and views things as an entire system rather than a singular department with entities within the department. So I think that part is critical. And then your ability to make decisions about hiring, how many staff is appropriate. A lot of those things are designated by the department. And you may say, well, we need 4 APPs, and the department say, well, the usual thing is 2, and so you have to kind of stick with that, or other examples like that. And the other simply is the margin. If you have a margin, you potentially have the option to designate that as you wish in the form of endowments and other funds. And I know in a division you can do that as well, of course. But I think your ability to do that, I would advocate for every division of plastic surgery to become a department. I believe in it that strongly, and I think it's that important because you can, I think, make a bigger difference to help your specialty and your surgeons.
I just want to qualify my statement. I'm not, Sam asked me pros and cons. I'm just speaking about the pros and cons because of current state. I came here knowing it was a division. I was the vice chair of a department of plastic surgery at Johns Hopkins. I know what it's like to be in a department. I didn't say I came here to accept what the current state is. I'm just dealing with the political landscape. But I would agree, and it is destiny of this specialty to be a department at every single institution in the planet Earth. But that doesn't mean you don't have to deal with culture and politics as you go out of this. You know, I'm still in a place where urology is a division of the Department of Surgery. Orthopedics was a division of the Department of Surgery here 20-something years ago. I'm not saying that this is necessarily the right thing, but you have to deal with what's the political landscape and the culture of the institution. And, you know, over time, we'll see what shakes out over time at this institution and others. But I agree with your point that we should ultimately all move to be departments.
Justin, I'm going to let Dr. Losey speak, and then I'm sorry I called you Justin. I should say Dr. Sachs. Dr. Sachs, after Dr. Losey speaks, I would like to see if you could answer. So, how do you envision making that transition from a division to a department, especially in a climate where you are, where it's not very well accepted? But let Dr. Losey speak first, and then please answer that.
I was just going to agree with Scott. I mean, and I know Justin as well, but if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu, period. And if you're not a department, then orthopedics will be a department, ENT will be a department, and you'll be a division. And you'll never have an equal voice with the dean unless you're a department. Sure, it results in greater responsibility, but plastic surgery is up to it. And I know Justin and I agree with that. We feel the same way. But it is critically, it is if you're not, then you're a division in the Department of General Surgery competing with the division of breast surgery for breast reconstruction. It is, I mean, I could speak for an hour on this. It's critical. I agree with Scott.
And then just to go back to the answer, I mean, there have been some papers recently that we published on this, and some departments are departments because they were departments many years ago, and some have transitioned. Sometimes the transition, unfortunately, happens when people either fall on their swords or transition away. And so I was at Division of Plastic Surgery at University of Pittsburgh in 2004 to 7, and it was not a department back then. It took actually somebody to leave to go to another department, which went from a division to a department. So if you get the routine here, it's happens in transitions. It happens with leverage. It happens when people are willing to sometimes leave to go someplace else. It happens when a search is started and everybody says we're not going to actually interview for this job because it's not a department. And I know that's happened in many divisions of orthopedics around the United States where they actually did that. They actually called their own and said this. Don't go interview there. Don't accept the opportunity. And so, you know, it's a transition. Over time, more programs will transition to that, but it requires, it's like physics. You got to put some energy into it.
Great. Thanks for everyone's thoughts on that. And our final perspective zooms out into system-wide leadership and institutional change.
Hey, Tim, you're
I
on
think,
mute.
Dr. King, I think you're.
Thank you very much. Dr. Gordillo, your leadership spans patient safety, wound care, and health system strategy across multiple institutions. What lessons have you learned about leading change within large healthcare systems, especially when trying to align frontline innovation with administrative priorities?
Yeah. So I'm going to start by telling the story of how I ended up there. When I started literally as an assistant professor, had interest in research, and I had a partner who was a PhD who was interested in research, and we wanted to do wound healing research together. But we were, young assistant professors. And so we started on our way, and eventually, and we had this vision that we shared, but eventually you don't have the resources to do it. And not necessarily research dollars, but human resources a lot of times. And so, the first thing that has to happen is you have to create a compelling vision that they want you to serve in this role. You have to be able to communicate this vision in a way that other people want to join you. And probably the most important thing is we had a sponsor, because as a young faculty, I can't go to the dean and say, hey, I have a great idea. Why don't you let us do this? We'll get laughed out. First of all, you'd be lucky to get an appointment with the dean, right? So because I have had people come to me and say they wanted to start wound programs, and the first thing is another really sort of key thing. First do, then ask. Show them that you can do this. As I tell people, it's sort of like gathering preliminary data for a grant. If you show when I do this X, when I do X, Y happens that benefits the institution, you have a little more credibility. It might be on a small scale, but you have a little more credibility. And, your sponsor, which is likely going to be your chair, is willing to, sort of lend their reputation to advance your ideas. Okay. So when I've done this, it has always been really in the service of research, which is my true passion. But it can't happen without sort of all these other things. And you have to show the value of what you do to the institution so that they want to give you this job. So how did I get my first job? It actually goes back to ELAM. And my individual project was to create this sort of comprehensive health inpatient, outpatient wound service. And why did I want to do that? I wanted to increase referrals to my outpatient wound center, so I had subjects that I could enroll. I wanted to improve the quality of care, because any of the research that I wanted to do was dependent on good clinical care, good clinical consistent care, right? I had a guy literally who was putting lemon yogurt on wounds. I'm like, oh my God, how do I get this to stop? That was what the motivation for me. But there were a lot of steps and a lot of people that have to help you, and you have to really be able to state a compelling vision, and being a data-driven person, try and give them some data that they're going to relate to. Now, the other really big thing, and we've talked about communication and alignment. Hospital administrators speak a different language than a clinician, and you need to speak their language, right? What are the institutional priorities, okay? So you need to show them how what you're doing is aligned with their priorities. You're going to have a hard time convincing them if what you're doing is not relevant to them and not relevant to what they're trying to achieve. So that's when I say, understand what their priorities are and align your work with their priorities, and play to their strengths, right? If you have a really strong, like at Pitt, we have really strong informatics. If you have really strong informatics, play to that, right? And you show how you're going to use that to, I can tell you I've developed a scorecard, and it's all based on the institutional priorities, patient access, innovation, the quality. So for the quality is our pressure ulcer incidents. You have to align with what they're doing. And one of the things that really helped me, I think ELAM helped me. I did my institutional, my plan was this wound service. And what ELAM did was, again, because I now have this sort of institutional backing, go and get trained. What are you going to bring back? They're asking that, right? They're asking these, we've invested in you. What are you bringing back? And I'm like, I'm going to bring back this. And that was when I got my first medical directorship, was when I laid out a plan. At ELAM, when you graduate, the dean comes for your graduation and sees all the institutional plans. you lay out your plan, and they hired me. And then you get to work with what your vision is. But again, it has to be aligned. And for me, the big alignment was in quality, because many of these metrics are benchmarked nationally. And one of the things that really helped me was there's an organization called Vizient, which used to be called United Health Systems or Healthcare. It's not the insurance. It's an academic consortium where you benchmark your quality metrics against other academic institutions. And we were the top performer in pressure injuries. So now I've got this piece of data that validates that what I'm doing is important. Now, the other thing that, again, you need to know, this quality data is tied to Medicare reimbursement, right? So you can tell them, I'm gonna, this is important. It's tied to your Medicare reimbursement. And they see the value in that. That was the start. When I got recruited, I went through several rounds of recruitments at other places before I moved to IU. And all of them wanted that. They wanted that wound care program that's going to help their quality outcomes. One of the things that helped me a lot too was like you kind of have to, I think Scott talked about it. You got to go and meet people. You have to, and not just when you first get there, but meet with them on a regular basis. Again, you need to know what they're thinking, what their alignment is, and show them. And like I have a scorecard and I have data. Like I'm going to show you how I'm performing. And that's how you get traction. But it's super helpful because I think at a health system level. So my medical directorship is a health system level position. I had one at Ohio State. I had one at Indiana University, and now I have one at UPMC. And as I said, I went from big to bigger to biggest. And you really see how they think and how an organization, what they do to try and move the needle forward. And for me, what's beneficial is, I have experience. So I don't think there's very many people with high level, like health, like David Song maybe has a high level health system job. There aren't a lot of plastic surgeons with high level health system jobs. And it's been helpful to accumulate that experience. I also think that it is another, and in my personal choice would be to, I've been my division chief. But for those of you who are thinking about leadership, you can ascend medical leadership now through traditional academic roles, division chief, chair, deans, or you can ascend through a health system leadership role. And so, so that you might want to get an MHA, you might get an MBA, but there's two really different ways to advance your careers now. And I think it's important to think about that. And either way you bring value, and you have to go with where your passion is. But I think that's a different concept, that there's now the old fashioned way of NIH grants, and that's one way, it's great. That's my preference, but health system leadership is another way. And serving on committees is huge. And especially in your own plastic surgery society, because you learn how large organizations make decisions. I mean, ASPS, I can tell you, cultivates their leaders from committee work. And you can enhance your leadership skills at a much faster rate in the plastic surgery specialty than you're going to do it in academia. So it's, great way to cultivate your leadership. It's another leadership pathway that maybe we don't push as much, but there's a lot there, and there's a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of potential for a lot of impact. It's really about, like I said, to me, I do it in service of my research, but you'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot. It's very different. And you have to enjoy that. And you have to be okay with, you can't get flustered the first time somebody says no, whether it's asking to start a program, asking for resources. The other sort of biggest thing I'd tell you when it comes to resources, right? We didn't have resources. And our chair sponsored us. So we would go to, the information warehouse and say, hey, we need a tech for half FTE tech. And he would maybe give us the money, but they had to commit to giving us the person. And so leveraging is huge. Understanding that you're not going to get everything the first time you ask. You can't get daunted by that. You got to come back with, look, I did this. You know, I think this is valuable. And again, having a sponsor. So there's a lot there. And then and then you got to integrate yourself into the way they think about things. So it's a lot, but it's definitely, you know, a challenge and ability to have impact in different ways. So.
Thank you, Dr. Gordillo. I'd like to open this up to the other leaders on the panel and see if anyone else has other insights or perspectives. Dr. Pusick.
I just want to emphasize what Gail just said about the other leadership roles, like the medical directorship, and how those. I would also add that there's good synergy. So in my other role in the Mass General Brigham Healthcare Enterprises, I'm the medical director for the MGB PROMS program. That it's like Gail, she has her passion around wounds, around PROMS. But the point is that I report directly to the chief quality officer and interact directly with the chief medical officer of MGB, and I interact across the 13 hospitals. So you could say, well, that means you're too busy to be a good division chief. It actually informs so much. Like I have a vision. I can see what's going on across the enterprise and have conversations with people at a higher level in the enterprise than I would if I was just a standalone division chief wondering what's going on. So there can be synergy as well. So it's an opportunity to prove your worth in different ways. And also just think the path of always, you know, just I need to be a division chief. That's my next path up. There's a lot of other great roles. So just Gail's comment about sort of other role, and that's also where plastic surgeons need to be. We need to be shaping how our healthcare, like how our hospitals run. We need to be shaping how the OR functions. We need to be shaping so many different aspects of that we are present and we are critically important to the function of an academic medical center. So, and that's in many ways maybe even more important than the division chief, or it's equally important and also incredibly satisfying. So just to keep that in mind, it's not just all about becoming a department chair or division chief.
Thank you, Dr. Pusick. Dr. Hollenbeck, your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. King. I agree a lot with what Dr. Pusick just said. And I would also add that, you know, a lot of us have some similar jobs and job titles and pathways and things, but that's not necessarily, and I tell this to trainees and students and other people, it's not necessarily the right answer. I think, you know, the right answer is up to the individual, and it's not the only way in which you can have an impactful career, and it's not the only way you can have an impactful life. And so I want people to keep that in mind too. You can also lead in other ways. You can lead within your community, perhaps in a way that is really important and really helpful for your community. Maybe it's not doing plastic surgery specifically, but it could be related to that in some way. You can lead in your smaller hospital. Many people don't necessarily work at a gigantic tertiary medical center, but it doesn't mean there's not opportunities for leadership there. In fact, those are the places where we need, you know, plastic surgeons just as much as at the big academic centers in leadership positions like that were mentioned earlier. And I totally agree with the idea of that there are other pathways besides, you know, chief and chair and dean. As Gail brought up, the whole operational side of things and healthcare administration is arguably even a more, you know, impactful position now than many of these other, you know, chief and chair positions, because you have access to the budget, perhaps more so than you do, that is resources more so than you do as a division chief or chair. So I would be open, you know, as you're developing your career to even look for kind of non-traditional, if you will, leadership roles and feel comfortable with that and feel like that's okay to take on some of these. And it might not necessarily be that I'm the program director and I'm on my way to be chief and on and on. There are great opportunities outside of that pathway too. So I wanted to echo that. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Hollenbeck. Dr. Sachs, you had something you wanted to share?
Agree with what Dr. Pusick and Dr. Hollenbeck said about getting involved with your institution. So at most healthcare systems, there is a hospital side and there's an academic side, and just study the structure. look at the power structure that runs that healthcare system. Look at the CMO, look at the operational managers. There's so many other ways to get involved. And I would say, and to Dr. Hollenbeck's point, take that non-traditional leadership role. There's so many opportunities for physicians to get involved with hospital leadership. If you just look at the top leaders in most hospital systems in an academic environment, many of them don't have MDs attached to their names. So they're looking for physicians who have clinical insight to get in there. And physicians, I know when I do this myself, I get involved in these perioperative leadership opportunities. They welcome your opinion, and your opinion carries weight. So there's lots of non-traditional leadership opportunities, and that gives you a bigger vantage point, and that gives a bigger light on the field of plastic surgery. If a plastic surgeon's at the head of a table in a hospital leadership structure, that helps the specialty, regardless if you're a department or a division. So get involved and volunteer for those committees, and you'll never know where that could lead. There's a lot more plastic surgeons than we realize that are running healthcare systems. I know there's a plastic surgeon running, what is it? What's the program out of DC? Blanking on the name of that system, where Mona Habibin is part of that system. That's
Inova.
Inova is run by a plastic surgeon. Andy Lee is the dean of UT Southwestern, head of the medical system. There's lots of plastic surgeons involved with leadership opportunities.
Yeah, there's Bob Murphy at Lehigh. There's Annie Ofadili at MSK.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot.
Yeah, reach out to these people, ask them. They'll be mentors, and they'll help guide you on their path.
And if you really, you can still write about what you do, even as a hospital leader, and it still is a significant contribution.
Great. Any other comments before I go to the last question? So the final question I'm going to ask, I'm going to open up to the whole panel. And the question is, how do we drive sustainable leadership and innovation beyond any one leader's tenure?
So the first thing I think of is level 5 leadership, right? Is making sure that you leave behind something that people can come in and it's going to be successful, right? Where a level 4 is maybe more about themselves and it's personality driven. That handoff should be, leave it better than you found it, I guess, as a leader for the next one, ideally. I think the biggest thing that I'd say is, and what I see is, if you want to be the leader in some way, you have to compete, right? So you have to, I would never, like when I left my institution, I wasn't in a position, but I would never have promised it to somebody. You can't make that promise, right? That's the biggest thing I'd say. You cannot make that promise if you are at a, high-level academic institution that you're going to be the next chief. That's not fair to the person that you're promising that to. Look for benchmarks that are external. So don't, you might be incredibly well respected and a great surgeon at your own institution, but the external benchmarks are, your service, your research, your education, like all those sort of external things that will make you valuable to other institutions. Well, believe it or not, they'll also make you valuable to your own. So they may not recognize it, but when you come back to them with a job offer and they want to retain you, it'll pay off. So I think that's part of it. And then the other thing is make it so it's fun. Make it so it's not a burden. Find your passion and align with that, because otherwise it won't be sustainable no matter who you are.
Great, Dr. Gudelo. Thank you so much. Dr. Losey.
That was an interesting question, because for most traditional leadership roles, one does not groom or mentor their replacement, right? I mean, so in general, like was just said, really great leaders empower those and train those around them. So if they get hit by a bus one morning, somebody could step in and it would be seamless. So you should always be doing that. something maybe that you weren't getting at, but which I'll share is I have had two really close friends, really close friends who became the leader at a different program. So they, well, both of them were leaders at one place, and then they got a bigger job at another place. Both division chiefs, department chairs. And the former chair was still there. In one case, the former chair mentored the new chair, and they developed a close personal relationship. The former chair knew their place and didn't overstep, but really mentored the new chair. And it was a beautiful relationship, like father-son kind of thing. The second I saw, the former chair didn't get their way and the person they wanted, and had to deal with the new chair that came and was obstructionist, was not supportive, kind of worked counter. So if we're talking about sustainable leadership, maybe it's those senior people that might be listening, that when a new leader comes up, the new program director, the new division chief within their own department, or when they branch out and become the leader, the senior folks at that place, the receiving place, should be supportive and helpful and really work to help them be successful.
Thank you, Dr. Losi. I mean, I'll make one little comment quickly, and then we'll go to Dr. Sachs and Dr. Pusick. But, you know, Dr. Futrell, who was at Pittsburgh, I think trained more leaders in plastic surgery than any other group. And maybe Dr. Losi, do you know what his secret formula was? Like, what did he do that where if you look at the Pittsburgh wall, it's like literally almost every person there has become a leader in plastic surgery.
Yeah, there's been a couple studies that looked at that. Most training program directors, fellowship directors, and chiefs have been trained at Pitt. I've asked Dr. Futrell that question, and he's been unable to answer it. So I don't know.
Get it done. Good is not enough.
Yeah.
Dr. Pusick, you go first. You look like you really want to go.
Fine, but I really like what Dr. Losi was saying about sort of so leadership transitions and I guess, yeah, you're right. Like somebody, we no longer pick our successors, right? But we can mentor someone who's going to go be a leader in another place. But the point I'd like to make is also we have a responsibility as senior leaders to create space for the next generation of leaders and not to hang on to our positions forevermore. That first scenario that you described, Joe, where somebody was, I'm not the chief anymore, but I'm going to help the other chief, and I'm going to know when I should stand back and let them spread their wings. I think, and it's not just us in plastic surgery, but I do think surgeon leaderships that we have a tendency to not know when it's time to step away from driving the car and be and actually just be that supportive player and when I say support, I mean, like, you can still access all your wisdom. You can give advice, but they can say, no, I'm going to do something different. But I think we have to be careful not to recycle ourselves or overstay the time period wherein we're actually having our max benefit, and welcome the idea to step away from being the person in charge and then being instead the person who's helping the next person in charge.
So I sometimes joke around and I say, if you want my job, you can have it. Just go for it. And I challenge people to do that. And I know Allison Snyder-Warwick is listening in on this Zoom right now. I see her name in the box. And when I first got here, I always knew that she was going to become a chief. She's now chief at Michigan. So I would always bring her into the room and we would discuss things in the division. I'd always share stuff. And I'd say, when you do this, this is the way I'm thinking about it. And I would always share my thoughts of how we were kind of building the structure here. And I think in order to be really successful as a leader, you have to be able to, I always use movie references. It's like Kung Fu Panda, when that guy at the end disappeared, you know, when Kung Fu Panda figured everything out and then the teacher disappeared, he was no longer necessary. And so what I've been doing here at WashU very, very simply and very transparently is trying to build the best structure that I see so that it will work without me if somebody was to extract me or take me away, or I left to something different. Not because I want to go, but I'm just trying to, I've always, wherever I've been, and I've been at 5 academic centers, 3 as faculty and, an additional 2 as training. And I was at Pittsburgh, and I love my time there, 2004 to 7. And I'm on that wall, my little picture with my skinnier face. But the point is, I literally wake up in the morning, I say, I want to make this place better than I left it. And that's kind of like the way I think about it. And I think if as a leader, if you say to yourself, I want to make this better than I left it, build a structure that will last after you go. And if you go, you might go tomorrow or next week or next year, but so that when you do leave, it's not in disarray, or that it's not going to fall apart because there's an interim there. All you have to do is just activate the current faculty or the staff to just follow the process that I think you've honed and made really good. So that's what we're doing here at WashU. I hope we're doing that. That's what I'm trying to do. And I think I would implore all leaders to build a structure that lasts and really elevates the field of plastic surgery to where it should be, which is where Scott Hollenbeck thinks all of it should be as a department. And I agree, but that's my thoughts on that.
All right. Well, we have about 10 minutes left. Does anyone have any final thoughts before we wrap up? Anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
So Dr. Gordillo, you mentioned the book club, and I'm wondering if any of you all have your favorite leadership books you'd like to share with the audience. I'm always looking for a good read.
I'll start with one that I really liked, actually. It was called The Contrarian Leader. And it was written by a guy who was the dean at USC, not the School of Medicine, the entire university. Before, it was not the guy who slept with the hookers, not that guy. And I don't know if any of you followed that saga. Oh, there was a murder and he was sleeping with hookers, and not that guy. And one of my favorite, I really like that book. And one of the favorite lines that I took from that is the #1 role of a good leader is to pick his lieutenants or her lieutenants and let them do their job. But I thought that book really resonated with me. The Contrarian Leader. Semple was the guy's name.
I'm going to mention one of you. I'm a moderator, not a panelist, but I think Dr. Losi may have mentioned it. I'm not sure, but the Leadership Challenge by Posner and Kozik is how you say their last names, I believe. So that book is a fantastic book for anyone who's interested in leadership. It talks about the 5 frameworks of being a great leader. And I've actually read that book a couple of times because I think it's such a powerfully good book for leaders.
Thank you.
Dr. Sachs.
So it's called Strategy by Lawrence Friedman, and it's got like 1,000,000 footnotes. It's the history of strategy. This British scholar, and I read it a few years ago, and it's just about strategy. But the best part about it is when you open it up in the first page, it's the best quote and you should kind of use it as a leader. And it's by somebody who didn't even graduate college, Mike Tyson. And the quote is, in this book, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. That's like the quote at the beginning of this very scholarly strategy book. And the point is like, you can read all you want and study about it all you want, but you got to get in the ring, and you have to expect that you probably might fail, you might get knocked down, but the key is to, just keep going forward. And I thought that was a great juxtaposition of Mike Tyson's awesome words. And then, and then of course there's strategy, and you got to study it and apply it, but get in the ring and don't be afraid to get hit and just keep going.
And bite people's ears off.
I mean, come on. Everybody has a bad case, right? A bad day.
Any other recommendations for books?
I'll put out there, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it was Christine Rohde recommended that to me. And I think I would just pull out that it's also about some of the emotional intelligence of being a good leader, and about how I don't know if it's a quote in the book, but something that I pay attention to is the idea that people won't necessarily remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And I think that as a leader, we have to remember that it's also about, and so whether that's inspiring someone or maybe not making them feel the way you meant to, but you just weren't being intentional and thoughtful about it. So I think a lot of it's about the interpersonal dynamics and also the importance of trust. I think without trust, leaders don't get very far.
I would recommend not a book, but a training, and that is to become a coach. Many people have benefited from being from an executive coach, but I think all leaders should become coaches because the skill set and the tool belt that you'll learn when you become an executive coach will empower you to be a much more effective leader. I cannot recommend that enough. Another thing I wish I had done 20 years ago.
Dr. Losi, do you have a program you recommend for people to do that with, or how would, if someone wants to become a professional coach, what's the pathway, or how do you do that?
Well, many colleges have, a year or an 18-month course. Usually it's at night in an executive format to become a professional executive coach. We started a peer coach training program here at Pitt. We've trained over 150 peer coaches, both physician and scientist peer coaches. If anybody's interested, you can contact me and I can tell you about that program.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Tim, I'll add, a bunch of books, a lot of them I've read or actually listened to driving in the car back and forth from various places, and that's really helpful. But after a while, they all start to kind of sound the same. They're all sort of the same ideas and same things. I think it's very important to get practical experience in leadership, and then you can apply some of these things you're learning. So how do you get practical experience before you become a leader? Well, you look for these other environments in which you can be a leader, and some of those come in the form of committees that you sign up for. You become the committee chair. But I had one even just in my regular life, which I often cite as an important step for me, and that was when I agreed to volunteer to be the Little League coach for my kids and our community. It sounds kind of funny, but actually I learned a lot about leadership in that role because I had parents that I had to manage, their expectations. I had kids that I had to put in certain positions while they might not have wanted to be in that position. I had to explain to them, we need you to be the best right fielder because that's what will help our team and that sort of thing. And I learned so much from that. And also to control, I think Joe used the expression restraint. You lose, you can't get all mad and scream and yell and stomp your feet because you regret that later. And you realize, I need to control my emotions better and not be upset, if I lose or something like that. So that's just a simple example of a way to get involved and test out some of your leadership skills, and you'll find that you grow a lot from those kind of opportunities. So don't always think that you have to be, the president of the hospital before you get a chance to actually, test out some of your leadership skills.
Some great advice there, Dr. Hollenbeck. Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, I think we can wrap up. I want to thank each one of you, our panelists, for your insights, honesty, and examples. Tonight, we heard not just about successes, but about tension, trial, and transformation behind lasting impact. Leadership in plastic surgery is evolving, and through conversations like this, we collectively shape where it goes next. To our audience, thank you for being part of this webinar. Let's keep the conversation going.
Tim, can I make a quick?
Yes, please, Dr. Gossain, please.
Well, thank you all for participating and for rounding out our webinars. And it shows how powerful the association is to round up people like this and who are already established leaders and can set examples for those who are coming into leadership. So that's the goal of this whole thing. And then branching into the course that Joe will be talking about at our annual meeting. I want to just make one comment. If we all think about the leaders that we most respect, irrespective of what their field was, think of those leaders, and those are the ones we might want to emulate. So if you think of our great religious leaders, for me, it's Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King. They didn't take leadership development courses, but they shared some of the things we discussed. And if we take Joe's comment, stay in love, they all had a passion for the people they wanted to serve. They saw what those people needed. They had compassion for that, and they founded great traditions based on that leadership. It's not a course or anything they did, and I'm sure if they needed to be in healthcare, they would need more direction, but they had that quality of compassion and caring. So we as individuals, and also as Scott pointed out, it need not be in medicine. It can be as your community football coach or basketball coach, whatever it is. Those are the people who taught us and brought us to where we are and gave us the inspiration. So my thought is that we in medicine, if we're going to follow that example, we should also look at all of the individuals who supported us to get to our role. There'll be nurses, medical students, residents. And oftentimes you'll see people who are so administrative that they ignore the people that really support them and may even be abusive to them because all they really care about is the final outcome of their leadership role. That really is not a leader. And that's not the type of leader that we like to emulate or that we think holds so dearly. So just always keep that in mind. And then the nuts and bolts on how to get there, I think we covered a lot of, but we want the underlying, why do you want to be a leader, to be what really carries us through.
Thank you for those wise words, Dr. Gosain. And with that, I think we'll end this webinar, and thank you all for participating.
Good night.
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Tim.